kick off. Right. So everything you say now is going to be recorded for posterity. So we won't be able to be as rude as we were earlier, unfortunately. So welcome, Warwick. Thank you so much for being with us tonight to join our weekly tastings. I've got to say, before I started drinking your wines, the Geograph label was the first label from your area that I'd ever tasted. And the majority of the wines that we're tasting tonight are from your Rock of Solitude range, which sits over Geograph Bay and has a really interesting location from an altitude point of view because it's enjoying this Mediterranean a climate influence, I'd imagine, but at a super high level. So again, two very different influences having an impact on the wines themselves. I also am so encouraged to see that you guys are planting things like Saperavi and Touriga. Touriga, I guess, has got a massively long Australian history. I'm thinking back to Rutherglen days. I guess that's where it all kind of kicked off in Australia, quite a lot of it in Southern Africa. But certainly Saperavi, gosh, the only Saperavi I've ever tasted has been some stuff out of Georgia, ex-Soviet Union, Georgia, and it's, as Lou would say, not worth washing one's feet with. I remember that, but I'm hearing far more encouraging stories about Australian Saperavi. So we might, if we've got time a little bit later, to talk about that. But thanks for joining us, and maybe we can kick off. Maybe you want to give us a bit of background to the winery and your two other partners in the business, and then we'll have a look at the Chardonnay.
Yeah, look, we come from my business. I've got a business partner who we've been in business together for the last 38 years. We started off, we're actually in the food business as well. So, and we come from that perspective of wine, which is, you know, consuming wine with food. And I think you can see that with some of the intensity of the wines we make. We try and complement, and the range of wines is quite variable. So not variable, but varying, so that you're getting those different sort of flavors. The vineyard itself, as I was saying earlier, sits 250 meters up above sea level, overlooking the Geograph Bay. But the interesting thing with it is from the bottom vineyard to the top vineyard is nearly a kilometre. And over that, and these are 50-metre difference between the bottom and the top. And so at the bottom vineyard, we have about 5 acres of water, which is a damming of the Henty Brook or a river, so which is constantly running. So we actually have fresh, clean water all the time. And at that, so that's where we grow Chardonnay, Grenache, some of those other small varieties, and Mourvedre, etc. And then you climb up to the top, and so that's the more riverbed sands. Up the top, you've got the heavier, darker red soils over granite, so that you've got a granite ridge running through there. So with things like our Sauvignon Blanc Semillon, etc., you're getting a real minerally sort of flavour. So as a small property, well, it's 120 acres, but as a relatively small property, we've got so much difference in the things that we grow. So, so it's been a great project. It's a great learning exercise. I mean, you're continuously changing. We're actually now also planting Montepulciano. We've just been Montepulciano and Sangiovese as well. So, which all blends in with the Cabernet. So we've got Cabernet. And then we've got Sangiovese, Montepulciano. So those sort of blends is I've just got to live to 150 to do all this, but they're looking pretty good. They're looking pretty good at the moment.
Well, I'm quite intrigued by the idea of a reverse Super Tuscan. You know, the Italians have made such a big bloody deal about throwing Cabernet into their Sangio. I love the idea of you throwing a little Sangio into your Cabernet. I think
that's it. Brilliant. Well, that's one of the things, was, as you're saying, with the Saperavi, one of the interesting things with Saperavi, you should probably all understand, is it's one of about 5 or 6 varieties in the world that actually bleed red, whereas all the other grapes obviously bleed white with the red skin, whereas that actually bleeds red. So one of the things we're looking for is the intensity of colour. It comes out really black. Quite lineal, a bit like Mourvedre is quite lineal as well, but Saperavi is quite lineal, and that's one of the things we're looking at. And that will then majority be going to Cabernet.
I also noticed that you use it. Well, I'll circle back to the Petit Verdot question, but again, you use quite a lot of it, which probably speaks to your ability to get it ripe and round and generous, whereas so many other parts of Australia really battle to get much more than color and phenolics out of Petit Verdot. So again, I think your particular patch of paradise is allowing that to flow through in the Verdot as well. But let's have a look at the Chardonnay. I was really intrigued by it. I don't think Halliday wrote the actual note for Wine Companion, but in the reference to this 2019 Chardonnay, the finish of the critique was it has a European feel to it, and I was sort of wondering what are they talking about when they're making a reference to, I guess, Burgundy.
Well, one of Margaret River is predominantly Mendoza clone, so it's a single clone. We use 5 different clones or 5 varieties of Chardonnay in the one blend. So you've got 95, 96, 277, 76. So 95 and 96 gives you the backbone of the wine. 277 gives you some spice, and the 76 gives you the acid. So with that wine, it's all hand-picked and on 3 different days generally, and depending on the season, as to the distance between. So it's hand-picked. It's once it goes straight into press, and each barrel is actually they're kept separately. The varieties are kept separately, but each barrel is sequentially filled. So as it comes off the press, every barrel is different. So you got because as you get further down the press, of course, it's more extraction.
Correct.
So
the
reason for that is again, it is estate. It's all estate grown. So then when we get to the blend at the end, we go through and grade each barrel, and then because we've got 2, we've got the Alliance, which is one blend. And then we've got the Rock of Solitude. So the Alliance has probably got a little bit more fullness in it, a little bit more of that older sort of style. But what we're looking for with the Rock of Solitude is to give it that flintiness, to give you more that Chablis sort of style. It's a real food wine, because when it's an aperitif as well. But when you're drinking that wine, you're sort of on the nose. The other thing is too, it's all wild ferment. So what you're getting on the nose, it's not Malo, it's wild ferment, and then you're getting the different flavors. So one of the things I suppose that why we do a lot of blending with our wines is that, again, originally being a chef by trade, you're used to the recipe, so trying to make the recipe and get those things to blend so you get the flavors. And one of the things is, we all got a glass there? No. But anyway, it's one of the things when you try it is you'll find that as you go back to it, you don't want it to be too cold, but what you'll get is that those different elements will come through. So you get some really, the white fruits, you'll get some lovely tropical fruits, and then it's got a real nice soft acid on the back, which is a real cleanser.
You're spot on, Warwick. When I first tried the wine, there was overwhelming tropical pineapple-y type of action going on, especially on the phenolics. Now that it's warmed up a little bit more, because that's the problem in Singapore, we always chill things too cold, and Chardonnay's got about a 3-minute window per glass where it's absolutely the right temperature. But the whole stone fruit and pear thing comes through, and the pear aspect really dominates. But geez, it's really easy to drink. I mean, my wife and I are sitting here saying, and we don't drink a lot of Chardonnay. We have a fair bit of Chablis, but it's really, really approachable, really easy.
Yeah, and I think, as I say, the blending of those different clones gives it that. I think gives it that interest. Whereas we make some fantastic Chardonnay in Western Australia and in Australia, but a lot of it is, I call, one-dimensional.
Yeah, I guess the story of Chardonnay in Australia is a long tortuous tale. It is still, I actually think it was only last week that I read something that it's still the most produced varietal in the world, and ergo, I guess, the most consumed. But gosh, there's a lot of frogs amongst the princesses and princes of Chardonnay, that's for sure.
It's been a real challenge in Australia too, because, and I'm old enough to remember when, coming from the restaurant business, the corporate wine was the Rosemount Roxburgh, going right back. And sometimes I'd like to be able to go back and drink some of those wines that we're drinking 20 years ago today.
Yes.
And you just look at it, you go, what in the hell were they thinking? It's like spitting chips.
Yeah, it's just all oak.
Yeah.
I must say though, Warwick, maybe it's just nostalgia, but I regularly get people asking for a Roxburgh style Chardonnay. They say, I'm fine, I get it, I know medium body and toes, but please, what if you got the taste like Roxburgh? And actually, certainly my limited sort of experience these days with current Australian Chardonnays, there's very little that's quite as muscular and all-pervading as Roxburgh certainly was in my day when I was back there.
Correct.
All right, we could bang on about Chardonnay all night, but let's move on now to the 2, 3, and 4, all Rock of Solitude. So again, harping back to that patch of terroir at Geograph. The jar number 2 is the Cab Malbec, also 2019. And then the Purple Patch GSM number 3. So maybe you could walk us through those two, and then we'll look at the Shiraz.
Yeah, well, I think if you've got a GSM there, probably go with that one first.
Okay. So that's number 3.
So number 3, go jump forward. So number 3, the Purple Patch. The Grenache is the backbone of that wine. It's 65% Grenache, and then the majority then is Shiraz. We vary between about 5 and 10% with that blend. Again, it changes each year with the Mourvedre, or the Mataro. So the whole being with the Mataro is to pull it together. So you get on the front, you're going to get some of those really caramelly, lovely cherry sort of notes and flavour. Then you get that traditional ripe berry Shiraz on the back. And the Mourvedre is there, and that gives it some tannin, gives it some acid, and pulls it together, so that you get hopefully you'll agree that you get a really lovely integrated wine. I think it's one of those too. It's a wine that in a hot climate, it's okay to put in the fridge, or put in the ice bucket for 10 minutes to drop it down. And it does go beautifully with some of the lifted flavors of Asian food too.
I find generally, I don't know if you agree, that how would you compare in broad brushstrokes Grenache from a warmer climate such as McLaren in comparison to WA, and particularly your site being far higher altitude? Are you getting something that's slightly leaner and more linear than you would out of a hotter, warm climate?
So Barossa Valley, yeah. See, the Grenache out of the Barossa Valley floor, it gets baked and it concentrates. So one of the critical things with Grenache is to manage the alcohol on it. And there was a few years ago, everybody was paranoid about alcohol. But I'm always of the belief that, as long as let's just make the wine and don't don't worry so much about it. As long as it's balanced. Correct.
The Spanish are producing ferociously high alcohol Grenaches these days, and that it's a factor of climate, no doubt. But the good ones are still balanced, and more particularly when you look at it 5 and 10 years down the track, they're not tipping over, they're not falling over. So there is a place for heat, for hot climate Grenache. But I'm particularly interested in high altitude Grenache because I think it lends a certain eloquence and structure to the wine at an earlier stage. So it makes an earlier drinking style Grenache far more interesting for me.
Well, it is, and that's the whole thing is that it's got that Grenache needs time to mature. to get those flavors. And that's one of the things, because of the, particularly with the cool nights. I mean, as I say to people, it's a bit like, you know, when you've been out on a hot day, walking the pavement, and you come in and you hit that air conditioner, you get that blast, and you go, how good is that? And it's the same for the vines, you know, and that's what it's about. They do the same thing. You can see, you know, if you go into the vineyard at nighttime, the leaves that have been really strangled by the sun lift again, and they start to expirate, because again, vines are like air conditioning, or any of those things. The hotter it gets, the more it shuts down. So, you know, your air conditioning at home, once you hit, well, particularly in Australia, once it hits 40 degrees, you know, the poor thing's struggling, and it's going down. And vines are the same. So to protect their moisture, protect themselves, they actually shut down from about 28 degrees up.
Okay, that's it. I guess I guess to a certain degree, you're preaching to the converted in Singapore, where every time we walk outside our bedroom, apartment, and office doorways, we just melt.
Correct.
Air conditioning is a very important part of our lifestyle.
Yeah.
So
they're the coldest taxis I've ever been in the world.
Yes, it's too true. So looking at that Malbec, that Cab Malbec by comparison, I didn't research the blend percentage, but I'm sure a fair amount more Cabernet than Malbec in it.
Yeah, 70%. It's 70% Cabernet.
Right.
And again, it depends. Malbec's also, you've got to be careful with, because it grows as it gets older, like in the blend. So you've got to underdo it rather than overdo it. So when we first blend it, you have to be a bit careful to make sure that we don't overdo the Malbec, because it becomes dominant. Mm-hmm. The Malbec, again, that we grow has a lovely perfume with it, which adds. And then we put in about 2 to 3% Petit Verdot, which again enhances the Malbec. Yeah. And just gives it that lovely perfumed nose. And the Malbec, of course, rather than the Western Australian classic of Cabernet Merlot, yeah, the Malbec is a lot stronger and holds the wine together. We don't actually, particularly in our area with our Cabernet, we don't actually have that issue as Margaret River does with the hole in the middle, the donut syndrome. We don't really get it. But the Malbec definitely sits in the middle. Again, it's quite lineal.
I think that the South Americans, I'm thinking of Chile, for example, you know, yep, so much about Malbec. I think a lot of their bottlings and blends are saved by Petit Verdot. It just Correct. Somehow seems to lasso it, right? And just sort of contain that overabundance that Malbec can often give.
It's a powerful grape.
Oh, no.
And it look like in any winery, they don't talk about it. We don't talk about it either, particularly. We do talk about it, but it's not on the label because it's only a couple of percent.
Yeah. And in fact, my experience of Malbec in Australia outside of WA is only really Clare that produces any kind of quality, thinking of Wendouree, and then back in the really old days, what was it? Treasure Chest of Woodley, I think it was called. And I think that had a fair play of Malbec in it. And then, of course, in Victoria, Mount Mary, I think they were.
Mount Mary does, yeah. Tim Adam is probably in Clare. He's probably got the biggest plantings up there, yeah.
All right, so then on to just a question on this, your interpretation of the Cabernet Malbec, with that Malbec being a little bit more linear than traditionally a lot of Australian stuff is. What's your opinion on cellaring potential for that wine?
We've got some that are now 15 years. We had one recently. They hold, again, the Malbec has a lot of natural acid with it, and the tannins, and it does it holds really well. So 10 years, no problem.
Right.
And it still keeps fresh. See, the wonderful thing, of course, is and that's taken some adjustment, but with the capsule rather than the cork, is that the freshness that you can keep in that for the next 10 years is, but it still integrates into the wine, so you get a softness about it, and the acid just keeps working it.
So, in actual fact, this kind of wine is showing a different kind of characteristic when it gets older than many others. It's actually managing to retain some freshness and youthful vitality, plus the aging of the tannins. It's quite an interesting notion to consider, really, that the eventual product of a wine like this is very different from what it used to be, for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. And of course, they're 99% safe under capsule.
Gosh,
in Singapore, have they taken the capsule, or are they still really looking at, really
I think it's price determined. It was really interesting because the other day we have a C2C sales platform that we do once a month, and there was a Henschke Hill of Grace 2006 in Stelvin that we sold. And of course, I got really excited because my experience of that age of any kind of wine in Australia, I reckon you got a 40% chance of there being some kind of corruption in the wine. And I thought, this is amazing. I hope it goes to a good home. And there was very little interest in it as a result of the Stelvin. So as an exercise, it was quite interesting for me. I think we eventually sold it to an Australian who was going back to Australia and knew what he was buying. 20%.
He was buying.
Yeah. So it ended up going to the right place. But as an exercise, it was quite interesting to see the consumer hesitation and the number of emails I got from people saying, "What are you kidding me? Hill of Grace in Stelvin?" So yes, I think people embrace it, but to a certain price point only. I think that's the
especially product. Again in a tropical climate. I would have thought the Stelvin would be a lot more satisfactory, because when you've got high humidity, unless it's stored in in a perfect world, you're gonna get issues with it.
Yeah.
But if you remember, Warwick, when Grange came out with their range of screw cap about a decade ago, the one market that pushed back big time was Asia. They just would not accept it at that price level. Wouldn't accept it. I mean, I'm with you. In terms of white wines, I think anything that's not under Stelvin these days, and it's more than 5 years old, I'm not touching it. Just not.
No. And the other thing is too, it's not the wines where the tragedy is it's not the wines that are totally corked. It's the wines that they're just off the edge. They just haven't quite got that freshness.
Yep.
And you drink it and you go, bloody hell, that's not like I remember it. The last time I had that was amazing, And then, and again, going back to the restaurant situation, when we used to have cork all the time, any bottle that I saw, and especially those days, nobody ever left anything in the bottle. But if you ever saw something come, with that much in the bottle come back, always try it and I go, yep.
Yeah.
They've done themselves a disservice that that people will not order that wine again because go, oh, yeah. And if you ask them, they go, they don't say it's corked, or they didn't say it was off or anything. They just go, oh, I didn't really enjoy it.
Not that jazzed. Yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
I had lunch in Singapore recently where somebody, sometimes we do these things blind, and somebody brought 2 bottles, which is the least one can do on a Sunday. And they were blind. And of course, so we drank them. And that was precisely the opinion that everybody had. It was Mosswood 96 in Stelvin and Cork. And I would have put my last cent on the fact that they were totally different wines, different regions, different everything. There was nothing particularly wrong at all with the Cork version, but the Stelvin just had it together in so many ways.
Mate, I own both of those 96s.
Oh, okay.
I've got them under Cork and under a Stelvin, and the Stelvin is just so much better.
Really?
It really.
Well, I think you should spread the love. How many people we got here tonight? About 20. It'll be a nice little dinner at yours.
Yeah. Good luck with that one, pal.
The other thing is too, is in Australia too, because we were the first really to move across to it in premium wine, is we actually have had to change our winemaking technique, because when you're under cork, you're making it differently because it's going to age. It's a bit like going back to the purple patch. We actually put half of it in older oak, and they might be 9-10 years old. But what it's about is that people forget is that the barrel is a living, breathing thing. So that if you do get that concentration, you're going to lose you'll get the concentration of the flavors, but also you'll get a little bit of maturation. So then when we put it back with the stainless steel version and blend it away, it's giving it an extra depth, which is it's manipulation of the barrels, which is quite important.
That's the argument that the organic winemakers will make. They'll only blend on flower days, for example, because they believe that the gravity forces on the barrel affects the flavor of the wine, and that's the most optimum day to taste the wine properly. I've actually got friends, there's nobody on the call tonight, so I can't call them out, who will only ever go to dinners and tastings on flower days, which I think is a terrible waste of time because there's not that many flower days. But,
that's right.
She's completely serious about it, and that's the only time she'll drink wine. And it's an interesting experience for sure.
And as a consequence, she never gets laid. But anyway, that's just the way it is. Shall we move on to the Shiraz?
Yeah, sorry, I'm rambling on. Yeah. So your highest rated wine that we're tasting tonight, the Shiraz, again at a really incredibly good price point for $39. I noticed that in terms of the winemaking, you lean less into the new oak and more into second generation French in terms of the maturation of the wine. So again, you're letting the fruit speak for itself rather than letting the oak get all over it. The comments from the winemakers, from the critics, were largely about length. That this wine has a prodigiously impressive length to it, I don't know why I haven't made more of a noise about this in the newsletters. It really is a phenomenally good rating for a wine that's under $40.
Well, that's that again. We are a cool clone. We actually have two clones again of Shiraz. We have what they call the Margaret River clone, which is a little bit fuller, but we have another one which is BVRC 12, so Barossa Valley clone, which is a lot more perfume. So we actually blend them back together. So you've got the Margaret River giving it a bit more grunt at the back, and then the BVRC 12 giving it some more of that lightness and that perfume, which I think was one of the, to me is one of the nice things about that wine. Is when you get it on the nose, you're getting some really lovely cherry flavors and some freshness. And then the length. So well, one of the things with oak is that unfortunately, if you use too much, and in Australia we've used a lot of American oak with Shiraz, a lot of those vanillin tones, which I think distract or can distract from the fruit, especially if it's new. You're not going. It's balance. So it's like cooking dinner. It's all about balance.
I'm guessing.
Warwick, the problem I have with your wines always, because I do the buying, and Rob does the selling, I do the buying, but the lower range of your wines are just so good that it makes it difficult for me to pay more for the higher end wines, which are also excellent. It's just that you haven't got that step down. Yours plateaued excellent in a straight line across the whole pricing spectrum. And Rob, you'll see this when you try the next two wines side by side, because they're both the Cabernet Malbec from Warwick.
Yeah.
One's the Rock of Solitude, and the other one's the Alliance. The Alliance is the Bomb Diggity.
Yeah.
Now the difference between them to me is that they're just both excellent. But you'll see that soon. But Warwick, it's not a criticism. It's a reason why you see in our range we've gravitated towards the Rock of Solitude, because it as a reward or a cost exercise, relative value exercise, it's just too compelling for us.
No, I understand that, and the Alliance, both the Chardonnay and in the Cabernet Malbec, is it's about the first couple of barrels, and it's not the Alliance is not a big production. Most of it's into the Rock of Solitude. The Alliance, the difference with it is, I think you'll find it's a bit tighter, and I think you'll find it's a bit more. It's a bit tight and but quite generous. But it's just again a little bit tighter in those flavors, and I think there's the intensity. For me, there's an intensity in there that is the difference. So yeah.
Well, there's very few wines in our range which across the board represent such stellar value, in my view, anyway.
Fantastic, thank you. We'd rather over deliver.
Yeah, you certainly do.
I've got to drink the wine, so like I don't sell anything I wouldn't drink.
So Warwick, just on their questions, the Alliance range is not sourced from a different set of vineyards. It's rather a different set of barrel choices. Is that
barrel choice?
Okay, that's
it. The Alliance is, as I say, my business partner and I have been in business nearly 40 years, and that's the alliance of the two coming together.
Right.
So when we do the barrel selections, we go through and grade the barrels in 3 different levels. So the same Shiraz. So we do. We've got another one, the Pepperelli Range, which is our entry level range. So the entry level, which again is amazing value in my humble opinion.
Yeah, we've just purchased some. It's coming up now.
It's on the way. It just left this week. Yeah.
No.
So what you'll see in that they're all from the same. It's from the same vineyard. It's just the difference is that we blend the two Shiraz slightly differently, and you'll find that the Pepperelli Cabernet Shiraz is a lot of it's just is older barrels, but the fresh they're still I think good ones. So you'll see similarity in them, and it's just the barrel selection.
Well, that's terrific. Before we say thank you and good night, are there any questions from anybody?
No, you haven't tried the number 5 yet.
Jeez, I'm rushing through this. Sorry, I thought everyone had already had a go. The reason why I'm not leaning into it too much is it's already sold out.
That's all right.
There's more on the way.
Oh, is there? Oh, okay. All right, I can make more of a noise.
Yeah, we sent another pallet up. We sent another pallet this week, or last week.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we've got a top up of most of the things, and then moving into I think it's the 2020 Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And the rest. This number 5, I know we've got more of that coming up. That's why I'm particularly interested to have a look at it.
So this was the one I was referencing to you earlier, that with 14% Petit Verdot, which is actually much more than the traditional Bordeaux blend would ever have in it, and that's what I was quite interested in. That you're getting your Petit Verdot to be ripe and full and broad enough to actually add much more than structure and perfume. It's actually adding body and fruit to the wine.
Yes, because it also our Malbec. I think I said earlier, the Malbec has a perfume with it as well, which a lot of Malbec doesn't. A lot of Malbec can be very flat on the nose, but we find with the Malbec and the Petit Verdot together, they sort of both work so well and add similarities to it. So they've both got on the backbone, they've got a different density, but on the front end, there is some synergy. And
then, of course, not to forget, so it's about a third Malbec, 60% Cabernet, and 14% Petit Verdot. What's your feeling on? The other thing about this that I'd made a note of earlier is your barrel treatment for Alliance. Is that different, or is that just determined vintage on vintage, or do you take a different position with the Alliance sort of premier cru of your stuff?
No, we're using similar mixtures.
Okay.
We're using some large format, particularly the Chardonnay. We're moving now towards because what we do is we've got some larger formats, some hogsheads. So you're looking at 500 litres against 225s, and we're finding with the 225s, as say in the Chardonnay, and it's the same actually within the Cabernet. We do the same, but it means that your backbone becomes the 500s, and then the 225 you can play with and just give it a bit more intensity. So you want to add a bit more oak, you can do that. You want to add a bit more freshness, like you can. So it's just getting that again. I don't know. It's every year we learn something new.
Yeah. Well, I guess innovation is the name of the game,
it.
right? It's something that's constantly changing.
Yeah, it is, and it's and I think one of the beauty with our wines is across the board, none of them taste the same. You know, like you've got the Purple Patch, it has its own uniqueness. The Cabernet Malbec, the Cabernet Shiraz, they're all individual. If you line them all up one after the other, you're getting different flavors. You're getting something different, which is, for me was really important. Whereas I've seen many lineups of wine, you go, oh yeah,
Same, yeah,
same from the same company, yeah.
Well, thanks again. It's been great sitting down with you tonight, Warwick. And it's overdue. I think we've been selling your wines for, is it 3 vintages, Lou?
Three vintages now, yes.
I think it's 3 vintages, yeah.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the support. It's been fantastic, and it's nice to see that you're taking a broad cross section of the wines too. So, anytime we can do anything, anytime you want to talk to us, we're always there.
Thank you so much. We'll do that.
No, I appreciate that, but I've got one question before you leave us.
Yes.
And that is the question I ask everyone. When you're not being watched and you're enjoying yourself, what wine do you like drinking?
Well, I actually really love the Purple Patch. I mean, you know, often I consider, the trouble is that it is very hard to put the cap back on it.
And when you're not drinking your own wines, what do you reach for?
Look, I'm a McLaren Vale. I like a lot of Coriol and stuff. I'm a McLaren Vale favourite, and I suppose that's one of the reasons we're on the same parallel, and two, I'm originally actually South Australian. So, I mean, I grew up next door to the Penfold Vineyards in McGill.
Yeah,
so,
fantastic.
Yeah, so being in from South Australia, had a lot of went to school with a lot of Italian kids, so it was always great to go around to their home. And you always, no matter what, you got little wine with little water, you know. So it's in the blood.
And my family, I'm an Italian family. My dad had pushed me away from the bloody wine. Yeah, I suppose.
No, he says it was okay. It's good for you.
The northern Italians are a little bit more Germanic, I think, than the southern.
They are.
So, in terms of, it's interesting, McLaren Vale, because we've got a Saperavi on our list actually, Messina. We promote their stuff. We had it a couple of weeks back. Amazing stuff. It really is. It's it really does grab your attention when it's done well.
Yeah, of course. Well, you've got, I mean, probably the most well-known guy down there is Stephen Pannell, who is the chief winemaker for Hardy's for a number of years. And he's really doing some fantastic, really interesting stuff. You know, like there's so many different varieties available down there, particularly some of the Italians. He's not bound by, as a lot of Europeans are, bound by the fact that it has to be this particular bean. So the DOC stuff, yeah. So we've also we just pulled the cuttings for Vermentino out today too to plant. So there you go. That's another one. We're into it. I'm into Vermentino at the moment. I love it. It's a good drink.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much. It's been fantastic meeting you. Thank you, everybody. Next week, we're back in the Barossa with Christy Schultz and Mark Bullman. We're tasting their latest arrivals that have just come up in Singapore. So if you can join us, that'd be good. And thanks, Warwick. We'll be in touch again soon.
Yeah, thanks all for coming in.
Yeah, ciao.
Talk to you again soon. Bye.
Okay.
Cheers, Warwick. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.